Something doesn't add up. Alberta, a province once dismissed as a barren, struggling backwater, is now the richest region in Canada. Bigger paychecks, lower taxes, and an economy that outshines the rest. But here's the twist: just a few decades ago, Alberta was barely surviving. So, what happened, and can it keep up this momentum going? Before the Black Gold Revolution, Alberta was struggling. Now, it's the place where opportunities thrive and fortunes are made. Let's rewind and uncover how Alberta transformed itself. To truly understand Alberta's rise, we must travel back to a time when its future was anything but promising. In early 1900s, Alberta was a land of endless farmland and sparse settlements. The economy was built entirely on agriculture. Imagine a vast and open landscape where survival depended on unpredictable weather. Winters were brutal and droughts wiped out entire crops. It might sound peaceful, but for those living there, it was a daily struggle. And then disaster struck. In 1930s, while many parts of the world were grappling with economic collapse, Alberta's already fragile agriculture economy was crushed. Droughts devastated the farmlands, people lost everything, and unemployment soared. By 1936, the situation was so dire that Alberta defaulted on its debt, the only province in Canadian history to do so. The financial collapse hit hard, and hope seemed all but lost. Even in 1940s, Alberta's economy was entirely dependent on the agriculture. With no industrial diversification, a single bad season meant disaster. At this point, Alberta was destined to remain a struggling rural province. But then, something happened that would change everything. Fast forward to 1947. Picture a small town near Edmonton, Leduc, a place where hope was almost lost. Imperial Oil has been drilling for years, finding nothing but dry holes. Then, on February 13, 1947, the impossible happened. A massive gusher erupted from the ground. Leduc No. 1 had struck oil, billions of barrels worth. This wasn't just a minor breakthrough, it was an event that flipped Alberta's fate on its head. Suddenly, Alberta wasn't a province of struggling farmers, it was becoming Canada's oil capital. Oil companies flooded in, each one eager to tap into this newfound wealth. Jobs exploded overnight, and people from across the nation moved here, drawn by the promise of prosperity. By 1950s, oil and gas had overtaken agriculture, pumping billions into the economy and fundamentally changing the province's identity. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. While other places found oil too, Alberta's discovery had a perfect timing. Global demand was rising, and the world was shifting in ways that would favor Alberta's booming industry. Before long, Alberta was producing over 1.4 million barrels of oil per day. By early 1970s, this discovery was the spark that ignited an economic revolution. But it wasn't just oil. The government saw a chance to reshape the future. Now that oil was flowing, Alberta's leaders had a critical choice: let foreign companies reap all the rewards or take control of their destiny. And guess what? They chose the latter, boldly. Most people didn't know that beneath Alberta's surface lay the third largest oil reserves in the world, only behind Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. However, much of this oil was trapped in oil sands, thick, tar-like deposits that were notoriously hard to extract. Under Premier Peter Lougheed in 1970s, Alberta invested heavily in technology to unlock these reserves. This wasn't just a gamble, it was a calculated, revolutionary step. In 1976, Lougheed established the Alberta Heritage Saving Trust Fund. The concept was simple but visionary: allocate a portion of oil revenues to a fund that would benefit future generations. At its peak, this fund held over $12 billion in assets. Although mismanagement later drained its potential, it represented a bold attempt at long-term planning. While other provinces raised taxes in the face of economic challenges, Alberta did opposite. They maintained low corporate tax, didn't impose a provincial sales tax, and created a regulatory environment that practically invited businesses to set up their shop. Today, Alberta boasts the lowest corporate tax among Canadian provinces at around 8%. Each of these moves wasn't just about quick wins. They were strategic decisions designed to build a resilient, future-proof economy. Alberta wasn't content with riding a single wave. They knew that while oil was present, the future demanded diversity. And then, just when it seemed everything was falling into place, a new challenge emerged. The 2000s marked the peak of Alberta's wealth. The oil boom had turned province into one of the richest regions on the planet. Cities like Calgary and Edmonton transformed into gleaming hubs of opportunity. In 2014, Alberta's GDP per capita soared to astonishing $84,390, a figure that dwarfed the national average. The unemployment rate dropped to record lows, and wages soared, making Alberta a magnet for talent from across Canada. But then, as with all oil booms, there was a twist. In 2014, global oil prices suddenly collapsed. The market, once on a tear, plummeted almost overnight. The crash sent shockwaves throughout the province. Tens of thousands of jobs disappeared in a matter of months. Companies that had thrived during the boom struggled to stay afloat, and even once booming real estate market began to suffer. Because Alberta's economy was so heavily tied to oil, the fallout was catastrophic, almost like watching a giant wave crush. This dramatic downturn forced Alberta to confront an uncomfortable truth. Relying too much on oil was a risky game. The very wealth that had built the province now threatened to bring it to its knees. And here's a question: could Alberta pivot fast enough to safeguard its future? Imagine being in the heart of Calgary during this collapse. Businesses shutting, the vibrant streets going quiet. The province had to decide: double down on its oil legacy or diversify to survive the next shock. The clock was ticking and the stakes couldn't be higher. Now, let's pause for a moment. Picture the tension in boardrooms and government offices as Alberta's leaders scrambled to chart a new course. The oil boom had provided immense wealth, but it was also a double-edged sword. With nearly 80% of export revenue coming from oil, the province faced monumental risk every time global prices dipped. In those tense moments after the crash, you could feel the uncertainty in the air. Families who had once celebrated the bumper wages were now bracing for hard times. The province's identity was under threat. Every decision made during that period would define Alberta's future for decades to come. Business leaders, economists, and everyday citizens started asking same question: what comes next? And while some argued a complete overhaul, investing heavily in technology, renewable energy, and finance, others believed that Alberta's signature low tax, pro-business approach would eventually steer the ship back to calm waters. As debates raged on, one thing was clear: Alberta was at crossroads. The narrative of prosperity was far from over. It was simply entering a new uncertain chapter filled with both peril and potential. So what's the ultimate lesson in Alberta's saga? It's a story not just about oil, but about resilience, risk-taking, and relentless drive to seize the opportunity, even when the odds are stacked against you. Alberta's transformation wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was built on bold decisions to harness its natural resources, strategic investments in long-term projects like oil sands and heritage fund, and a consistent commitment to low taxes and business-friendly policies. Even today, as the world shifts towards renewable energy and global markets evolve, Alberta's future hangs in a balance. As of December 2024, the province's unemployment rate stood at 6.7%, a reminder that challenges persist even in prosperous times. So, what comes next? Some experts insist that Alberta must diversify its economy now before it's too late. Others argue that by doubling down on its strengths, maintaining low tax regime, and nurturing its entrepreneurial spirit, Alberta can weather any storm. The truth is, the province is at a critical juncture. Its next moves will determine whether it continues to reign as Canada's richest province or if it becomes a cautionary tale of overdependence. Picture the next chapter. Alberta, still proud and powerful, must now reinvent itself for the modern era. It's a narrative of transformation that is still being written, a story of hope, risk, and resilience that resonates beyond its borders. Alberta's journey from a struggling society to an oil-fueled economic titan teaches us that success isn't guaranteed. It requires constant adaptation, a willingness to take risks, and the foresight to plan for a future that is always uncertain. And that, perhaps, is the most compelling part of Alberta's story. A reminder that even in the face of adversity, there is always potential for reinvention. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. There is so much more to explore in the world of economic transformations.